we are going to be joined by Kate Fortmueller, PhD, Associate Professor of Georgia State University. Dr. Fortmueller is Associate Professor of the Film and Media History in the School of Film, Media, and Theater, and affiliate faculty in Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Georgia State University. Her work focuses on labor and crises in the U.S. media industries. She is the author of Below the Stars: How the Labor of Working Actors and Extras Shapes Media Production, Hollywood Shutdown: Production, Distribution, and Exhibition in the Time of COVID, and the editor of Hollywood Unions. She is also co-authoring a book with Miranda Banks on Hollywood Walkout: Creative Labor in the Age, which is about how changes to labor and production cultures led to the 2023 dual strikes. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Fortmueller. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you to the organizers for inviting me to speak. My name is Kate Fortmueller. As you mentioned, I'm an associate professor at Georgia State University, and I will be speaking about working actors and extras, but more from, I would say, a union perspective, not a non-union perspective, which, as Dr. Caldwell mentioned, is a very kind of robust part of the media industries. And a lot of my work is going to be drawing from my first book, Below the Stars: How the Labor of Working Actors and Extras Shapes Media Production. Okay, so the 2025 strikes, or 2025 strikes me as a particularly significant time to consider the present and future of creative labor in California. The 2023 SAG-AFTRA and WGA dual strikes and the uneasy recovery that took place during the 2024 IATSE negotiations led to even more industry disruption as a result of the tragic fires in Altadena and the Pacific Palisades. As Los Angeles rebuilds, Governor Newsom, the legislature, the unions, and lobbyists are all trying to expand the tax incentive that retain the film and television jobs that have been central to the identity and economy of Southern California for over 100 years. But I'm not here to wax nostalgically about Hollywood. Rather, I plan to look at actors, their work, the long-time precarity of this position, and then sort of close with a bit of a provocation about what are some ways that we can sort of think about how to support workers within this particular condition of precarity. Okay, so what is an actor? This might seem like a very silly question. Surely we all know the answer. Meryl Streep is an actor. And when Noah Wyle saves lives on ER and now The Pit, he is acting. Daveed Diggs is an actor who has played Thomas Jefferson on stage in Hamilton. He's still an actor when he's playing a smaller role as a civil rights attorney in Law & Order SVU. In the words of actor and the theorist of acting, Konstantin Stanislavski, there are no small parts, only small actors, meaning that any actor is capable of bringing forth depth and nuance in any role, from the background to a semi-conscious ER patient. Actors are the ones that we are connecting with on screen oftentimes, right? They take the screenwriter's words and make them come alive. And whether they have speaking or non-speaking roles, they often occupy a great deal of a director's attention and time. It's very easy for us to point to these recognizable and famous people with speaking roles and say they make a living practicing their craft and they are therefore actors. For some people, the question of who is an actor might get murkier when we're talking about the many people who have not and likely will not make a living as a working actor. As Dr. Caldwell pointed out, artists have always had to find day jobs, right? So somebody who maybe exclusively books, right, the industry term for an actor when an actor is cast in a role, background work might not necessarily fit always into sort of popular conceptions or categorizations of this work. Individual actors also might have different criteria for when they are comfortable saying, I'm an actor. If any of you have watched the SAG Awards, then you may have heard at one point an actor say that when they got their union card, that was a formative moment. where they felt like they were a professional actor because, among other things, it meant that they had sort of had access to health and dental care. For many working in Hollywood, the union is not just a set of contract minimums, but a signifier of professional development and status. So, and many have noted from probably this morning, throughout the day, by the presence of some of the unions, Hollywood is a unionized industry, and it's sort of integral to understanding film and television work in the United States. I'm going to do a little bit of background to this, but just FYI, so we can clarify terms. The actors we see on screen are oftentimes members of unions and guilds, and those unions and guilds represent a much broader spectrum of performers than those I just mentioned. Today, I'm going to discuss some of the challenges that working actors and extras encounter while trying to make a living in the arts, and also some of the things that came up during the 2023 strikes. But before I get to the specifics, I just want to take a brief aside and set the stage for who the Hollywood unions are, clarify some of their acronyms. There are many. Okay, so what are the major unions in Hollywood? Unionized Hollywood workers are typically members of any of the 9 unions listed on this slide. Prior to 2012, SAG and AFTRA were 2 separate unions, and most film work was done under SAG contracts, while other television work was done under AFTRA. The argument for the merger was that a more consolidated base of workers together would wield more strike power. It would also simplify union memberships and dues for the actors that were being forced to be in both unions. SAG-AFTRA and the WGA are likely the most familiar actors or the familiar workers and unions for those that are not entrenched in Hollywood sort of lingo and history. But this is probably because they go on strike the most. And the dual strikes in 2023 are the most recent times that they have both gone on strike. People sometimes refer to the unions on the left as the above the line unions. So that's a term that references where some actors, writers, and directors fall on a budget sheet. So the ability to negotiate above union minimums. The unions that represent the crew, largely some of these groups on the right, are often referred to as below the line, meaning they don't have the agency or clout to negotiate above their union rates. In reality, most of these unions, most of these unions have members that would be considered below and above within the same union. So, for example, Local 600, which is the camera union, part of IATSE, represents cinematographers, but also a number of camera assistants who are not negotiating sort of above a set minimum. Similarly, stars are going to be firmly above the line, but working actors and extras are working for contract minimums. Okay, so who negotiates these contract minimums? Well, all of these unions negotiate their contract minimums every 3 years with a trade organization called the Alliance for Motion Picture and Television Producers. In 2026, Doug Hessender will replace Carol Lombardini and will be negotiating on behalf of 350 signatory companies for over the course of various cycles, totaling 80 collective bargaining agreements, right? So one of the things that I would say is a little interesting about this new president, he was the former executive.
Hello, Dr. Fortmueller. It looks like you might have frozen on our end. Hopefully we'll get you back in just a moment. And thank you to our attendees for your patience. We'll be resuming momentarily.
Okay.
Great, we have you back. You froze for a moment there. Oh, now we lost her. Just one moment, everyone. We'll get started again shortly. All right, we have you back. You are muted. If
All
you want to
right.
go ahead and
Yeah,
reshare your screen.
you said great, we have you back, and it completely booted me out of booted me out.
The joys of online conferences, no problem.
Yes, yes.
If,
I was gonna
if you
say
can
it's
go
been
ahead and reshare your screen as well.
Been a minute. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So I hopefully just really quickly, all the unions negotiate. Oh boy, it's saying my internet's unstable. Let's hope this is fine. Negotiate with the AMPTP, who is for the first time going to be led by Doug Hessinger, former executive director of AFTRA and SAG. Okay. So key points of negotiation for SAG-AFTRA have sort of, at least for each round of negotiations since the 1950s, the key issues on the table have been contract minimums, residuals, and pension and health contributions. They didn't necessarily achieve all of these things in the 1950s, but these have been the primary bargaining concerns for SAG and AFTRA, as well as the WGA. SAG and AFTRA, SAG-AFTRA, WGA, TGA. Residuals, which is one of the sort of big terms, are a form of payment for reuse of material. These are very complicated formula, but largely, I would say one way to think about it is that they are based on platform of release and then platform of replay. So, theatrical film replaying on a broadcast network like NBC is going to have a particular calculation for how much actors will get with each additional replay. So, as new technologies of distribution develop, the unions need to renegotiate those rates. This is a particularly important bargaining term for working actors, but others in Hollywood, because the work obviously continues to generate value as studios license things out on various distribution platforms. And residuals are a way that the unions have been able to collectively bargain continued earnings for workers in these precarious careers. So in 2023, I'm going to sort of go through these. We have the kind of normal issues that were being negotiated, but then there were a number of different career-specific issues. And I'm going to highlight the ones that were for SAG-AFTRA because the WGA is just a separate topic. Um, and I've underlined the ones that to sort of pay attention to, particularly here. I should note that this sort of success-based residual formula is something that both the WGA and SAG-AFTRA were looking for, as was AI. So I'm going to briefly address some of these concerns to give a sense of sort of where actors were coming at in relation to these. So the first one I will talk about is AI restrictions or regulation. So everyone was concerned and everyone continues to be concerned with AI and how it will impact actors and every other career. As a professor, I am often very concerned about AI and how it affects my job and my teaching. But during 2023, there were actors, particularly background actors and voice actors, who were concerned about how AI could potentially replace their work. The concerns related to AI for background were that some things like full body scans would be used to replace all background, and voice actors have had this sort of long concern that they can be replaced by other sort of like generated voices, or people would give the rights to use their voices in perpetuity, thus taking away a lot of that work. Self-tape auditions. So auditions are obviously the way that actors are cast in any given role. There is a long history of actors sending in tape, but as we all have cameras and recording devices in our pockets, essentially, these have become more common. Essentially, what this means, and I will speak to when I was interviewing voice actors in 2017 and 18. This was one of their particular concerns facing their work. A lot of voice actors that I spoke with had invested in high quality recording equipment in their homes because their jobs and being able to continue to work required them to record and send in clean quality audio in order to get booked on roles. This required a lot of different skill sets. So I think similar to what Dr. Caldwell was talking about in terms of what what creative people are being asked to do in order to get work. This is something that is also very much part of what union members were being asked to do well before these terms were renegotiated in 2023. Finally, hair and makeup equity. So one of the asks for SAG-AFTRA in 2023 was that actors be allowed to hire their own hair and makeup professionals if the production cannot provide them with someone who can work on their hair type or with their skin tone. So one of the things that I hope is sort of like clear from even specifically just thinking about these 2023 issues is that many actors encounter a wide array of other sectors of the industry in order to do their work. So when we're thinking about what the work is of an actor, it's more than what we're seeing on screen. It involves a number of different things leading up to them getting cast, but then also things like working with hair and makeup professionals sort of appropriate to their hair and skin tone in order to look their best so that they continue to have things where they're real and use that to continue working. So in early careers, a lot of actors aren't necessarily even going to be participating in these union ecosystems, right? As actors arrive in Los Angeles, these union minimums might not necessarily be relevant to their careers. They might be looking on backstage.com, scrolling through casting breakdowns, which are brief descriptions of roles on Actors Access. And just continually looking for roles, sometimes in student projects, right, to build their reels that they can send out to look for representation. Some actors may have secured an agent, so somebody to help them get auditions who's going to take a percentage of their earnings. Others might be represented by management companies, which function similarly, but also are allowed to produce in addition to represent these clients. Um, those might be the people who their first kind of contact is in terms of understanding the work, right? So it's possible that when I was sort of talking about this, you maybe were imagining a Judy Garland, like a young modern Judy Garland, and what would that look like in a remake of A Star Is Born? I know we've had many, but the days of getting discovered never really existed. Increasingly, actors are using all the tools at their disposal to establish their screen careers. What do those look like now? I'm going to try to run through some of these quickly because I've had some hiccups. But I think one thing to keep in mind is if we're talking about SAG-AFTRA, who is in SAG-AFTRA? SAG-AFTRA members are performers that we see in television commercials, music videos, and video games. They range announcers, broadcast journalists, hosts, dancers, puppeteers, voice actors. It's not just the Meryl Streeps and the Noah Wileys, but a very wide range um, of people doing work on screen. When historians speak of Hollywood in the studio era, so just thinking about what this history is for actors, they'll often talk about a time when actors were kept under long-term contracts. In reality, actors have always worked under freelance contracts for a day, sometimes a week. Um, Many actors had consistent employment by a studio, but some were constantly, especially extras, constantly in pursuit of work. In the 1910s, anyone who worked as an extra had to show up at studio gates. When central casting took over in 1925, they had to call in daily looking for work. So, one of the things that I argue in my book with more historical examples and sort of detail is that extra work and some of these early freelance acting careers um, really anticipate some of the characteristics of the gig economy, even well but beyond the kind of transitions that happened in the post-war. So fast forward to present day, thinking back to the issues that actors faced in the recent negotiations, I think one of the things to consider is that these professional issues, right, they're involved with various intermediaries. They are also moving between various employers. Um, in order to just get cast in films, television shows, and commercials and make a living. As a result, the union is often the thing that provides a bit of continuity across all of these different jobs. Okay. So the last thing I will sort of talk about in my kind of remaining time is, do actors make a living? Um, this is a surprisingly difficult question to answer. As you know, SAG-AFTRA is a union that has 160,000 members working across a variety of career sectors. And historically, I would say SAG-AFTRA and then also SAG-AFTRA have not been forthcoming with information about earnings data. So when I was doing my research for Below the Stars, I found letters from union staff explaining that this information would just be too discouraging for actors and aspirants. So that might tell you what you need to know about this as a career path. But what I'm confident in saying is that oftentimes what we are getting is data that presents an illusion of opportunity and sort of optimism about work. So, oh, sorry, back to this. Okay, so what I'm showing you right here is 1947, right? Is thinking about like what were people earning? So $7,500, which is the kind of benchmark for the lowest earning, is approximately $107,000 in today's terms. So as you can see, this is a tremendous amount of money that people at a certain level are working, who are working as actors are making in 1947. 1947 is kind of an interesting date because this is a moment in Hollywood before the Paramount consent decrees. So essentially a moment when actors were on these long-term contracts, when the studios were able to make a lot of money through anti-competitive practices and owning their own theaters. At this time, there were 742 actors under contract. So when we're thinking about these total earnings, many of the actors who are making lots of money were probably under contract. This benchmark of $7,500 is a tricky one, right? Because if you think about any kind of given sort of sector, if you're saying that that all these 1,268 people make less than essentially $107,000. We're not learning very much about what they're making sort of at the bottom, right? Okay, so the next kind of things, and I'll just kind of move us towards the end. This history of, I think one of the things to sort of think about is even when people are making a lot of money, um, those careers are not guaranteed long term. So I have seen sort of letters from Bela Lugosi, iconic actor who played Dracula, begging the executive secretary of SAG for work in the 30s. Just like repeated sort of letters. He's very upset about sort of the state of the industry. Um, Fast forward to 2018, in a very sort of Fox News, say a very kind of I don't know, especially bad Fox News report. Of somebody making fun of former actor or former Cosby Show actor Jeffrey Owens working at a Trader Joe's in 2018, sort of inspired an outpouring of support for kind of what it means to have a day job as a worker, and how the complication of, right, what Pamela Adlon, also an actor, is saying here is that your visibility never goes away, but the money sure does. So the one thing I will sort of mention sort of towards the end here is, I think in terms of when we're thinking about opportunities, we are sort of exiting a period which has often been referred to as peak TV. So unprecedented numbers of productions happening in Los Angeles and across the US. So many schools, and I think this perhaps like dovetails with some of the concerns that Dr. Caldwell has about education, is that many schools, universities started programs, workforce development programs in places like Georgia to staff up shows that were looking for workers throughout the 2010s and 2020s. So fueling this huge boom in production. So one of the things that in the project that I'm working with Dr. Miranda Banks, that we are concerned about and looking at is how the kind of overproduction of this particular period has created more trained workers that are now, as we are in a period of decline, or television production decline, who are kind of adrift professionally, looking for work. So as these opportunities go away, what does that mean for this workforce that has been developing over the past 10 years? That universities have played a huge part in sort of building up and making promises to. So part of the things that I'm sort of interested in thinking about, or that I would like love to kind of talk more about with people, is sort of how this industry has kind of created or tried to create different ways of supporting actors through the tough times. Residuals and unions are part of it, but a number of foundations that something like the Motion Picture or Film and Television Fund and the SAG Foundation that are there to provide support mechanisms for actors in particular, as well as ad hoc mutual aid, such as the many grocery funds that seem to spring up during the strikes, are all ways that support has been available to actors. But I think given the kind of amount of workforce that we have developed, I think it's worth having a conversation of what it looks like to support a creative workforce in the future. Apologies for going a little bit long, but I look forward to questions and conversation.